The rain hammered down on the empty street like bullets from the sky. Marcus wiped his windshield, squinting through the storm as his old truck crawled through the flooded roads. It was past midnight and he should have been home hours ago. The construction job had run late, and now this weather was making everything worse. That's when he saw her. A woman in white scrubs stood at the bus stop, soaked to the bone. Her dark hair stuck to her face and she clutched a small bag against her chest. No umbrella, no jacket, nothing to protect her from the freezing rain. The bus shelter had a broken roof offering no cover at all. Marcus pulled over without thinking. His mother had always taught him to help people in need, especially women alone at night. He rolled down his window and called out over the storm. "Hey, you need a ride?" The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide with fear at first, but then she seemed to recognize something safe about Marcus. Maybe it was his kind face or the way he kept his hands visible on the steering wheel. She hesitated for a moment, looking down the empty street where no bus was coming. "I don't want to bother you," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "No bother at all. You'll catch your death out here," Marcus replied, leaning across to open the passenger door. "Come on, get in before you freeze." The woman hurried to his truck, her wet shoes splashing through puddles. As she climbed in, Marcus noticed her scrubs had a hospital logo he didn't recognize. She must be a nurse getting off a late shift, he thought. That explained why she was out so late in this weather. "Thank you so much," she said, settling into the seat. Water dripped from her clothes onto his floor mats, but Marcus didn't care. "I'm Sarah." "Marcus," he said, turning up the heat. "Where are you headed?" Sarah gave him an address across town, in a neighborhood Marcus knew was pretty rough. He frowned but didn't say anything. Maybe she couldn't afford to live anywhere better on a nurse's salary. Times were tough for everyone these days. As they drove through the storm, Marcus tried to make conversation. "Long shift at the hospital?" Sarah nodded, staring out the window. "Very long. Sometimes I feel like I never get to leave that place." There was something strange in her voice, a sadness that seemed deeper than just being tired after work. Marcus glanced at her in the dim light from the dashboard. She looked young, maybe in her 20s, but there were dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. "Which hospital do you work at?" Marcus asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Mercy General," Sarah said quickly, then changed the subject. "What about you? What do you do?" Marcus told her about his construction work, how he was trying to save up enough money to start his own business. Sarah listened politely, but he could tell her mind was somewhere else. She kept checking the mirrors like she was worried about being followed. When they reached her address, Marcus was surprised. The building looked abandoned. Half the windows were boarded up, and the front door hung crooked on its hinges. This definitely wasn't where a nurse would live. "You sure this is the right place?" Marcus asked. Sarah was already opening the door. "Yes, thank you again." "You're very kind." She paused before getting out, looking back at him with those tired eyes. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you believe people can change?" "I mean, really change, no matter what they've done?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "I guess so, why?" But Sarah was already stepping out into the rain. "Thanks for the ride," she called back, then hurried toward the broken building. Marcus sat there for a moment, watching her disappear into the shadows. Something didn't feel right. The building, her strange question, the way she kept looking around nervously. But what could he do? She was safely inside now, out of the storm. He drove home through the empty streets, unable to shake the feeling that there was more to Sarah than she had let on. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, but Marcus couldn't wash away the memory of those sad, desperate eyes. Little did he know that his simple act of kindness had just pulled him into something much bigger and more dangerous than a rainstorm. Sarah wasn't just any nurse, and that building wasn't just any shelter from the storm. Some secrets are worth dying for, and some people will kill to keep them hidden. 3 days passed before Marcus saw Sarah again. He had tried to forget about the strange encounter, but her question kept echoing in his mind. "Do you believe people can change?" There had been something desperate in her voice, like she was asking for herself. Marcus was grabbing coffee at a gas station near the construction site when he spotted her through the window. She was at the payphone outside and she looked different. Instead of scrubs, she wore jeans and a hoodie pulled up over her head. Even from a distance, he could see she was shaking. He paid for his coffee and stepped outside. "Sarah?" She spun around, fear flashing across her face before she recognized him. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Getting coffee. Are you okay? You look upset. Sarah glanced around nervously like she expected someone to jump out from behind the gas pumps. I'm fine. Just making a call. But Marcus could see she wasn't fine. Her hands were trembling and there were fresh bruises on her wrists that she tried to hide by pulling down her sleeves. Sarah, what's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble? For a moment it looked like she might tell him. Her mouth opened, and he saw that same desperate look from the truck. But then a black car pulled into the gas station, and Sarah went rigid with fear. I have to go, she said quickly. Wait, Marcus called, but she was already walking away fast, her head down. The black car followed her direction, driving slowly. Marcus felt his stomach twist with worry. Something was definitely wrong here, and it wasn't just his imagination. That evening, Marcus couldn't concentrate on his dinner or the TV show he was trying to watch. He kept thinking about those bruises on Sarah's wrists and the terror in her eyes when she saw that car. His mother's voice echoed in his head. When someone needs help, you help them. That's just what decent people do. Against his better judgment, Marcus drove to the address where he had dropped Sarah off. The abandoned building looked even worse in daylight. Broken glass covered the sidewalk and graffiti covered every wall. This was definitely not where a nurse lived. Marcus parked across the street and waited. He felt foolish, like some kind of stalker, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was in real danger. Just before sunset, he saw movement in one of the upper windows. A shadow passed behind a piece of cardboard that covered the glass. Someone was definitely living in there. Marcus was about to leave when he heard shouting from inside the building, a man's voice, angry and threatening. Then he heard Sarah scream. Without thinking, Marcus ran across the street and through the broken front door. The inside of the building was even worse than the outside. Trash covered the floor and the air smelled like mold and something else he couldn't identify. Sarah, he called out. The shouting stopped. Marcus climbed the stairs, stepping carefully over holes in the rotted wood. On the second floor, he found an apartment with the door slightly open. Sarah, are you in there? Marcus? Her voice was small and scared. You shouldn't be here. Please go away. I'm not leaving until I know you're safe. The door opened wider and Sarah appeared. Her lip was bleeding and there was a red mark on her cheek that would be a bruise by morning. Oh my God, Marcus said. Who did this to you? It's complicated, Sarah said, looking past him down the hallway. You really need to leave. If Tony comes back and finds you here. Tony did this to you? Sarah nodded, tears starting to fall. He's not a bad person, not really. He just gets angry when I try to leave. Leave? Sarah, what are you talking about? I thought you were a nurse, Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. A nurse? I haven't been to a hospital in months except... She stopped herself. Except what? Nothing. Look, Marcus, you seem like a good guy. That's why you need to stay away from me. I'm not who you think I am. Marcus stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. Then tell me who you are. Let me help you. You can't help me. Nobody can. Try me. Sarah looked at him for a long moment like she was weighing something in her mind. Finally, she spoke in a whisper. Those scrubs I was wearing the night you picked me up, I stole them from a hospital laundry room. I was pretending to be a nurse so I could get close to someone in the ICU. Get close to someone? Why? Because Tony made me. He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd hurt my little sister. Marcus felt cold dread spreading through his chest. What did he make you do, Sarah? Before she could answer, they heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Sarah's eyes went wide with terror. He's back, she whispered. You have to hide. Marcus pressed himself against the wall behind the door as heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs. Sarah quickly wiped the blood from her lip and tried to fix her hair. The terror in her eyes made Marcus want to grab her and run, but there was nowhere to go. Sarah, you better be up there. The voice was deep and rough, filled with anger. Tony appeared in the doorway a moment later. He was bigger than Marcus had expected, with thick arms covered in tattoos and a scar running down his left cheek. His small dark eyes scanned the room suspiciously. Who were you talking to? He demanded. Nobody, Sarah said quickly. I was just watching TV. But there was no TV in the room, just an old mattress on the floor and a few boxes of clothes. Tony's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me, girl. I heard voices. I was talking to myself, Sarah said. Sometimes I do that when I'm nervous. Nervous about what? Tony stepped closer to her and Marcus could smell alcohol on him even from across the room. About tomorrow, Sarah said. About going back to the hospital. Tony smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. That's right. Tomorrow you finish the job. No more delays, no more excuses. Tony, please. There has to be another way. What you're asking me to do. What I'm asking you to do is save your sister's life, Tony snapped. Or did you forget about little Emma? Did you forget what happens to her if you don't follow through? Sarah started crying. She's just 8 years old. She doesn't even know I exist anymore since you moved her to that place. That place is keeping her safe from people who might want to hurt her because of what you owe me. Marcus felt his anger rising. This man was threatening a child to force Sarah to do something terrible. He wanted to jump out and fight Tony right there, but he knew that would only make things worse for Sarah and her sister. I've done everything else you asked, Sarah pleaded. I got you the information about the security guard schedules. I found out which rooms have cameras and which don't. I even got you the fake ID badge. Isn't that enough? No, it's not enough. Tony grabbed Sarah by the shoulders and shook her. I need someone on the inside, someone who can walk around that hospital without raising suspicion. The man in room 304 has information I need, and he's dying. If he dies before I get what he knows, we're all screwed. What kind of information? The kind that could put me away for life if it falls into the wrong hands. Your job is to make sure that doesn't happen. Marcus's blood ran cold. Room 304, that was a hospital room number. And if Tony was talking about someone dying, about information that could put him away. You want me to kill him? Sarah whispered. I want you to help him die a little faster. Tony corrected. The man's already on his way out. You'd just be putting him out of his misery. I can't do that. I won't. Tony backhanded her across the face, the sound echoing through the empty room. Sarah stumbled and fell against the wall, fresh blood trickling from her nose. You'll do it because you love your sister more than some old man you never met. You'll do it because if you don't, Emma won't see her 9th birthday. Sarah sobbed, holding her face. There has to be another way. There is no other way. Tomorrow morning, you put on those scrubs, walk into that hospital, and you finish this. The old man gets his medicine a little early, and everyone goes home happy. Tony pulled out his phone and showed Sarah the screen. Marcus couldn't see what was on it, but Sarah gasped and covered her mouth. That's Emma at her new school, Tony said. Sweet little girl, isn't she? It would be a real shame if something happened to her on the way home tomorrow. You're a monster, Sarah whispered. I'm a businessman, and you're going to help me close a very important deal. Tony headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and Sarah? If you even think about running or going to the police, remember that I have friends everywhere. Friends in the police department. Friends in the hospitals. Friends in places you can't even imagine. There's nowhere you can hide that I won't find you. After Tony left, Sarah collapsed on the mattress and cried like her heart was breaking. Marcus waited until he heard the front door slam and a car engine start before coming out from behind the door. Sarah, he said softly. She looked up, her face streaked with tears and blood. You heard everything. Yeah, I did. Now you know what kind of person I really am. I'm not a victim, Marcus. I'm a killer, or I'm about to be. You're not a killer, Marcus said, sitting down next to her. You're being forced to do something terrible to protect someone you love. It's still murder. Not if we stop it from happening. Sarah shook her head. You don't understand. Tony has connections everywhere. He wasn't lying about that. The last person who tried to cross him ended up in the river with cement shoes. Then we don't cross him directly. We find another way. There is no other way. Marcus took her hands in his, careful of the bruises on her wrists. Sarah, listen to me. What if I told you there was a way to save your sister? Stop Tony and keep that man in room 304 alive. I'd say you were crazy, maybe I am. But I have an idea. Marcus spent the rest of the night explaining his plan to Sarah. It was risky and complicated, but it was the only chance they had to save everyone. By morning, Sarah looked like a different person. The hopeless despair in her eyes had been replaced by something Marcus had never seen there before. Determination. Are you sure this will work? Sarah asked as they sat in Marcus's truck outside Mercy General Hospital. I'm not sure of anything, Marcus admitted. But it's better than letting Tony force you to become a murderer. Sarah nodded and checked the fake nurse's badge Tony had given her. What if something goes wrong? What if Tony finds out? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, we focus on saving the man in room 304. They had learned a lot in the past few hours. The patient was named Robert Chen, a 67-year-old accountant who had been Tony's business partner years ago. Robert had kept detailed records of all their illegal activities, including money laundering and drug trafficking. When Robert got sick and ended up in the hospital, Tony realized those records could destroy him if they ever came to light. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Sarah would go into the hospital as planned, but instead of hurting Robert Chen, she would warn him about Tony's plan. Meanwhile, Marcus would contact the FBI with an anonymous tip about Tony's location and criminal activities. If everything worked perfectly, Tony would be arrested before he could hurt Sarah's sister. "What about Emma?" Sarah asked, voicing the fear that had been eating at both of them. "My cousin Jake is a private investigator," Marcus said. "He's already on his way to check on her. If we're right about where Tony has her hidden, Jake will make sure she's safe before we make our move." Sarah took a deep breath and opened the truck door. "Okay, let's do this." Inside the hospital, Sarah's heart pounded as she walked through the corridors. The stolen scrubs felt heavy on her body, like they were made of lead instead of fabric. Every nurse and doctor she passed seemed to stare at her, like they knew she didn't belong there. Room 304 was in the ICU, just as Tony had said. Sarah checked the hallway to make sure no one was watching, then slipped inside. Robert Chen looked smaller and frailer than she had expected. He was connected to several machines that beeped and hummed quietly. His eyes were closed, but they opened when Sarah entered the room. "Are you my new nurse?" he asked in a weak voice. "Mr. Chen, my name is Sarah. I need to tell you something very important, and I need you to listen carefully." Robert's eyes sharpened, and Sarah realized he was more alert than he appeared. "You're not really a nurse, are you?" "No, sir. I'm here because someone wants to hurt you. Someone from your past." "Tony Rodriguez," Robert said immediately. Sarah was shocked. "You know, I've been expecting this for weeks. Ever since I got sick, I knew Tony would try something. He's too paranoid to let me die naturally, knowing what I know about his business." "Then why didn't you go to the police?" Robert laughed, but it turned into a coughing fit. When he recovered, he looked at Sarah with tired but intelligent eyes. "Because I'm dying anyway, and I didn't want to spend my last days in a courtroom." "But if Tony sent you to kill me, why are you warning me instead?" Sarah told him about Emma, about Tony's threats, about how she had been forced into this terrible situation. Robert listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. "You're very brave," he said when she finished, "but you're also in great danger. Tony doesn't forgive betrayal. I know, but I can't live with myself if I hurt an innocent person." Robert was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he reached under his pillow and pulled out a small USB drive. "Everything Tony is afraid of is on here," he said, pressing it into Sarah's hand. "Bank records, drug deals, murder contracts, everything. I was going to take it to my grave, but maybe it can save your sister instead." "What do you want me to do with it?" "Give it to the FBI. Tell them Robert Chen says hello and that his final accounting is complete." Before Sarah could respond, she heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, angry footsteps that made her blood freeze. "Tony," she whispered. "He's early," Robert said grimly. "Hide the drive. Don't let him know you have it." Sarah quickly slipped the USB drive into her shoe just as Tony burst through the door. He wasn't alone. Two large men in expensive suits flanked him, and all three of them looked furious. "What's taking so long?" Tony demanded. "The job should have been done by now." "I was just preparing the medicine," Sarah lied, her voice shaking. Tony studied her face carefully. "Something's wrong. You look different." "I'm nervous. This isn't easy for me." "It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be done." Tony pulled out his phone and showed her a new photo. Emma was walking out of school, unaware that men in a van were watching her. "My friends are getting impatient," Tony said. "Do the job now or Emma gets hurt." Sarah looked at Robert, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. He was ready to die to protect her and Emma, but Sarah wasn't ready to let that happen. "Okay," she said, reaching for the medicine cart. "I'll do it." But instead of grabbing the syringe Tony expected, Sarah grabbed the emergency call button and pressed it hard. Alarms started blaring throughout the hospital and red lights flashed in the hallway. "What did you do?" Tony roared. "I chose to be a hero instead of a killer," Sarah said, backing toward the window. That's when the first FBI agents appeared in the doorway, guns drawn and voices shouting. Marcus's anonymous tip had worked perfectly, but Tony wasn't going down without a fight and Sarah was still in danger. The hospital room erupted into chaos. FBI agents shouted orders as Tony's two bodyguards reached for their guns. Sarah dove behind Robert's bed as bullets shattered the window behind her. "Nobody move! Federal agents!" The lead FBI agent had his weapon trained on Tony, who stood frozen in the middle of the room. But Tony was smarter than Sarah had given him credit for. Instead of surrendering, he grabbed Sarah and pulled her in front of him as a human shield, pressing a knife to her throat. "Back off or the girl dies," Tony shouted. The FBI agents hesitated. Sarah could feel the cold steel of the blade against her skin and smell Tony's sweat mixed with cologne and fear. "Let her go, Rodriguez," the lead agent said calmly. "You're surrounded. There's nowhere to run." "There's always somewhere to run," Tony snarled. "And I've got insurance." He pulled out his phone with his free hand and speed dialed a number. Sarah's heart sank as she realized he was calling his men who were watching Emma. "Do it," Tony said into the phone. "Kill the girl." "No!" Sarah screamed, struggling against Tony's grip. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of confirmation that Emma was hurt, Tony's face went white with shock. "What do you mean they're gone?" he shouted into the phone.
"How can they be gone?"
From the doorway, Marcus appeared behind the FBI agents. He caught Sarah's eye and smiled grimly. "Because my cousin Jake is very good at his job," Marcus called out. "Your men are probably zip-tied in the back of a police van right about now. Emma is safe." Tony's grip on Sarah loosened slightly as panic set in. That was all the opening the FBI needed. The lead agent fired a taser and Tony collapsed, taking Sarah down with him. Sarah rolled away as Tony writhed on the floor, electricity coursing through his body. The two bodyguards had already surrendered, their hands raised high above their heads. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, helping Sarah to her feet. She nodded, touching her throat where Tony's knife had been. "Emma? Safe. Jake found her at a house across town. She's with Child Protective Services right now, but she's unhurt." Sarah started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief. For the first time in months, her little sister was truly safe. The lead FBI agent approached them. "Ms. Williams? I'm Agent Martinez. We need to talk." Sarah's heart sank again. She had helped the FBI catch Tony, but she had still been part of his criminal organization. She could still go to prison. "Before you say anything," Agent Martinez continued, "I want you to know that your cooperation today has been noted. However, we'll need you to testify against Rodriguez and provide any information you have about his operations." Sarah reached into her shoe and pulled out the USB drive Robert had given her. "Will this help?" Agent Martinez's eyes widened as he took the drive. "Where did you get this?" "Mr. Chen gave it to me. He said it was his final accounting." Robert, who had been quietly watching the drama unfold from his hospital bed, spoke up weakly. "That drive contains 20 years of Tony Rodriguez's criminal activities. Every crime, every victim, every dollar. I kept meticulous records." "Why?" Agent Martinez asked. "Because I knew someday I'd need leverage to protect myself. I just never expected to use it to save a brave young woman and her sister." Over the next few hours, Sarah told the FBI everything she knew about Tony's organization. It turned out to be much bigger than anyone had realized. Tony wasn't just a local criminal. He was connected to a national network of drug dealers and money launderers. "What happens to me now?" Sarah asked when the questioning was finally over. "That depends," Agent Martinez said. "You were coerced into participating in criminal activities, and your cooperation has been invaluable. The prosecutor will likely offer you a plea deal, probably probation and community service, maybe some time in a halfway house. And Emma, your sister will be placed in temporary foster care while we sort out the legal issues. But given the circumstances, I expect you'll be reunited soon." As the FBI agents led Tony and his men away in handcuffs, Tony caught Sarah's eye one last time. The fury and hatred in his expression made her shiver, but she stood tall and didn't look away. "This isn't over," Tony mouthed silently. But Sarah knew he was wrong. It was over. Finally, completely over. Marcus stayed with Sarah as she gave her final statement to the police. When it was all done, they sat together in the hospital cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee and trying to process everything that had happened. "I still can't believe it worked," Sarah said. "Neither can I," Marcus admitted. "When I saw Tony pull that knife on you, you saved my life. You saved Emma's life. Why did you do all that for someone you barely knew?" Marcus thought about it for a moment. "Remember that night in the truck when you asked me if I thought people could change?" Sarah nodded. "I think you answered that question yourself today. You changed from someone who was willing to commit murder into someone who risked everything to save a stranger. That's the kind of change that gives me hope for the world." Sarah smiled through her tears. It was the first real smile Marcus had seen from her since that rainy night when he had picked her up at the bus stop. But their story wasn't quite over yet. There was still one more surprise waiting for them. 6 months later, Sarah walked through the doors of Mercy General Hospital, wearing real scrubs with her own name embroidered on the pocket. She had finished her nursing program and passed her state boards with flying colors. The same hospital where she had once planned to commit murder was now her workplace. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Sarah," called Dr. Patel from down the hallway. "Room 310 is asking for you specifically." Sarah smiled and headed toward the room. Patient requests were common now that she had been working there for 2 months. She had a reputation for being especially kind and patient with difficult cases. But when she entered room 310, she stopped in surprise. Robert Chen sat up in bed looking much healthier than the last time she had seen him. "Mr. Chen, what are you doing here?" "Having my 6-month checkup," he said with a grin. "The doctors say I'm in remission. It seems I'm too stubborn to die after all." Sarah felt tears of joy welling up in her eyes. "That's wonderful news." "I have something for you," Robert said, reaching into the drawer of his bedside table. He pulled out an envelope. "This came for you at my address. I think it's from the FBI Victim Compensation Fund." Sarah opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a letter explaining that Tony's criminal organization had been completely dismantled. Over 30 people had been arrested and millions of dollars in illegal profits had been seized. "I can't accept this," Sarah said, staring at the check. "Of course you can. You earned it by helping bring down one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the state. But I was part of that organization." "No," Robert said firmly. "You were a victim who found the courage to become a hero. There's a big difference." Before Sarah could respond, someone knocked on the door. Marcus peeked his head in, wearing a visitor's badge. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "Not at all," Robert replied. "I was just leaving anyway. My ride is here." As Robert gathered his things, he paused next to Sarah. "You know, I've been thinking about starting a foundation to help other young people in situations like yours. People who get trapped by criminals and need a way out. Would you be interested in helping me run it?" Sarah's eyes widened. "You'd trust me with something like that?" "I can't think of anyone I'd trust more." After Robert left, Marcus and Sarah walked to the hospital cafeteria. It had become their regular meeting spot, a place where their friendship had grown stronger over the past 6 months. "How's Emma doing?" Marcus asked as they sat down with their coffee. "Amazing," Sarah said, pulling out her phone to show him pictures. "She's in a great foster family, and I get to visit her every weekend. The social worker says if everything goes well, she might be able to come live with me next year." "That's great news. What about your construction business? How's that going?" Marcus grinned. "Better than I ever dreamed. Turns out there's a lot of demand for honest contractors. I've got more work than I can handle." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the busy hospital staff rush past their table. Sarah thought about how different her life was now compared to 6 months ago. She had a job she loved, a future with her sister and friends who cared about her. Most importantly, she had learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. "Marcus," she said quietly. "Yeah, I never properly thanked you for what you did that night, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You don't need to thank me. You did all the hard work. No, I need to say this. You saw something good in me when I was at my worst. You helped me find the courage to do the right thing. I'll never forget that." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "You know what the best part is? You're going to help other people find that same courage. That foundation Robert mentioned, it's going to change lives." "We're going to change lives," Sarah corrected. "I can't do it alone." "Are you asking me to be your partner?" Sarah smiled. "I'm asking you to be my friend. The kind of friend who doesn't give up on people, even when they've given up on themselves." As they left the hospital together, Sarah thought about that rainy night 6 months ago when a stranger had offered her a ride. She had been running from her problems then, afraid and desperate. Now she was walking toward her future, hopeful and strong. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Marcus had proven that by simply stopping for someone in the rain. He thought he was just helping a nurse get home, but he had actually saved 2 lives and helped bring down a criminal organization. The evening sun cast long shadows across the hospital parking lot as Marcus walked Sarah to her car. She was no longer the frightened woman he had picked up in the storm. She was a nurse, a sister, a friend, and soon to be someone who would help other people escape from dangerous situations. "Same time next week?" Marcus asked. "Wouldn't miss it," Sarah replied. As she drove away, Sarah caught Marcus's reflection in her rearview mirror. He stood there watching until her car disappeared around the corner, just like he had that first night when he made sure she got safely inside the building. Some people come into your life for a reason, Sarah thought as she drove through the city streets. Marcus had come into hers during the darkest moment of her life, and his simple act of compassion had changed everything. 3 years later, the Robert Chen Foundation for At-Risk Youth had helped over 200 young people escape from dangerous situations. Sarah served as the director, while Marcus handled the construction and renovation of safe houses. They had become more than friends and business partners. They had become a family of choice, bound together by their shared mission to help others. Emma, now 11 years old, lived with Sarah in a small house near the foundation's headquarters. She was a bright, happy child who had no memory of the terror that had once threatened her life. Sometimes Sarah would catch her sister drawing pictures of nurses and construction workers, and she would smile, knowing that Emma had found her own heroes in the most unexpected places. On quiet evenings, when the foundation's work was done and Emma was asleep, Sarah would sometimes think back to that rainy night when she had stood at the bus stop, convinced that she was beyond saving. She had been wrong about so many things then. She had thought she was alone, that there was no way out of the darkness that surrounded her, that good people didn't exist anymore. Marcus had proven her wrong about all of it, not with grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but with a simple question. "Hey, you need a ride?" The foundation's motto, painted on the wall of their main office, reflected the lesson Sarah had learned that night. Sometimes saving someone starts with just showing up. It was a reminder that heroism doesn't always require superpowers or perfect plans. Sometimes it just requires the willingness to help a stranger in the rain, to believe in someone when they can't believe in themselves, and to do the right thing even when it's difficult. Tony Rodriguez was serving 3 consecutive life sentences in federal prison. His criminal network had been completely dismantled, and the information on Robert Chen's USB drive had led to dozens of additional arrests across multiple states. Every few months, Sarah would receive a letter from another prosecutor, thanking her for her testimony in yet another case. She never wrote back, but she kept every letter in a special box. They were reminders of how far she had come, and proof that her decision to trust Marcus had rippled outward in ways she could never have imagined. As Sarah pulled into her driveway that evening, she saw Emma's face pressed against the front window, watching for her return. It was a sight that never failed to make her heart swell with gratitude. Her sister was safe, loved, and free to be a normal child. That alone made everything they had been through worthwhile. Inside the house, Emma bounced excitedly as she showed Sarah her latest school project, a report about community helpers. "I wrote about you and Mr. Marcus," Emma said proudly. "My teacher says you're real-life superheroes." Sarah hugged her sister tightly, remembering another little girl who had once believed in superheroes but had lost faith that they existed. That girl had been wrong, too. Heroes were everywhere. They just didn't always wear capes. Sometimes they drove old pickup trucks and offered rides to strangers in the rain,